Yeah, thank you for the introduction, and also thank you for the invitation. It's very exciting for me. It's the first time in China, as for many of the speakers. Very happy to be here. I'm having the time of my life, to be honest, the last 2.5 days, and I'm going to tell you about a few of my games. And I heard you said PBJ the musical. The rest of my Chinese is not great, so I don't know what the rest was. But there are a few other games in the presentation as well, because all are for phone and use phone as the medium. My name is Philipp. I'm from Germany, from a medium-sized town in Germany that you will probably not know. And when I started with paper craft. So that was before I studied design. I made things out of pop culture, from video games, etc., out of paper. I designed a 3D model. I unfolded it and put the template on my website where people could download it and print it and build it at their home. For example, you see many people made the SpongeBob series and printed it at home, made it at home and sent me the photo back, and then I was quite happy that it spread around the world from my children's room. And that's why the first app that I was doing, I have no background in development. That was all a bit self-taught, and the first app that I was doing was basically just like a PDF presentation, like a more or less interactive PDF presentation that I made together in Xcode interface builder back then, which was only for making a whole zoo of paper animals, and it had no code at all, and it even had no printing at all. So you really had to trace through the paper on the phone, which was really because I didn't know the code how to print stuff. And the first code that I learned then was for a semester project that I used to make a game where you lay the phone on the table and then you hit beside the phone, which makes the content of the phone shake and carry your, in that case, frog or bike or whatever, through the world. And that was in the time of the, I think, second iPhone, so that was quite early in the stage of mobile game development, where everyone was looking for how to interact with phones, what to do with phones. So there were quite a lot of new ideas, what to do with stuff. It was pretty much like a gold rush of the iPhone interaction search in terms of gaming. And this got me my first little indie award, and skyrocketed me into the indie game community. I had no idea that things like this existed. I just liked to play, but I didn't know that there was a whole community around this indie scene. So that brings me to my first part, which is context. I love the context. I love the phone as a medium. And when I ask you, what are you seeing here, then maybe half would say it's a monkey. The other half would say it's a photo or a postcard of a monkey. So it's either the medium or the message. And there's this small threshold where you have to decide now, am I seeing the context or am I seeing the content? Or you could even say, I'm seeing an LED wall depicting a postcard of a monkey. Or if you're watching this over the stream or video later, you could even say you see a screen that's in front of you with an image of an LED wall depicting a postcard of a monkey. So it really depends where you draw the line, what is the context, and where the content begins. But the interesting thing is that you can never see more than one thing at once. You have to decide where you draw the line, and you can see the postcard and the monkey as at the same time. And this is what I love to play around with. And this is quite evident when it comes to typography, because letters only stand for are the pure form of placeholder. It's really an automatism that when you see a letter, you only see what it stands for, but you never see the shape. As a designer, of course, you know what shapes letters have, and but you tend to forget that these shapes also could represent something in the real world. For example, these shapes could have physics. They could fall down and the letters could behave like they were existing in the real world. And some letters, of course, actually do exist in the real world, but they're not isolated to be physically existing. And this is something that was quite intriguing. And an idea that came to my mind was when you write a small minor m and a minor I, and then the m falls down, hooks somewhere, swings and kicks the dot of the I. And the magic is that this is unexpected, because usually you see through the letters, but you're not seeing the shape of the letters. And in that case, I'm switching the content to the context. So what you're writing doesn't matter at all. You don't have to see through it. You have to use the shapes as shapes. And of course, you know already the shape of the letters, and you know you already have a basic set of shapes, but you don't use them like shapes. And in this game, you can just kickstart into the game because you already know these shapes, but you've never used them like shapes before. And to go a bit deeper in the whole content-context metaphor, in my master thesis I did a study that I put a few phones on the ground and then let people find it. The next thing I did was I drew a white square on the ground with chalk, and then I placed the phone inside the white square. And then, even though it's the same phone, it was treated very differently. So people were approaching it, they were discussing about it, they were holding small conversations about it, and then they would eventually dissolve, but they didn't pick up the phone. So we'll see, they'll go home now and ask, what did I just see there? But no one did actually touch the phone. And that's only because I changed the context, but not the content. Sorry for displaying a Samsung phone in an iPhone slide, but that's just the phone that I light on the ground. And now you're wondering, if you're finding a phone, what is the model, what is the price, what could actually what could I do with the phone as a phone? Because of course I see it is a phone, but if I add the frame, you start wondering why is it placed there. You start searching for an intention, and this is evident by being in the middle of this white square, and you're posing different questions. You're asking, is this even a phone? And you're wondering why it has this context, and this creates some sort of distance that that doesn't make it a phone anymore. And this distance is the same distance that you have to, for example, a game or some content that is shown behind a screen, which in that case is the TV or whatever device you're playing a game on. And this screen, you can be sure that everything that happens beyond the screen will not come out of the screen. And you're trying to find, you're trying to make sense of the world behind the screen, and you can be sure that it has no consequences. And that's why you let people drown in The Sims, you can run wild in GTA. You know that there won't be real world consequences because all of the story happens behind the screen. And then you're posing questions, what are the rules behind the screen, what are the ethics, what are the consequences, and these are very different consequences than when you compare that to an actual phone. Because the phone is something that you have close to yourself, and especially when it, with the release of the iPhone 10, another mindset came up. Apple was trying to dissolve the boundary between hardware and software with the screen shape. The screen shape was matching the app icons. the blackness of the screen was so black that you couldn't defer a black part of the screen from the frame anymore. And this is even more important with the dynamic island, for example. The dynamic island is like really like a hardware promise that it will always pop out of the top part of the screen because it looks so much like hardware that you will always know where to find it, because you have the feeling now it has to be here because it's basically hardware. So it really dissolves hardware and software, and that's a really interesting thing. And when you compare things that are trying to deal with your emotions, you will find on the one side a classic console game, Heavy Rain, that's really trying to shake your emotions, and it does quite well, I think. But when you compare that with Send Me to Heaven for phone, the promise is just throw your phone as high as you can. That is speaking to very different emotions, because it's playing with the context and not only the content. On the first level, this is only for the representation. So if, for example, in WarioWare, you see that Mario is holding a small Wiimote, the controller appears in the game, or same in Zelda, and it really connects the two universes, that you have the feeling, okay, now I see I'm somehow part of the game, but it's still a world on its own, and it's just bringing it into the present. And the second level is a meta level. For example, this was in Metal Gear, I think, where you had to physically unplug your controller to plug it in another slot, that the game forgets that you were player one. Classic example, of course, also Stanley Parable. And the third game that I made, Sometimes You Die, was very much on the meta level, very not subtle. It's desuppressing the context and just being very blatantly in your face that the game knows that it's a game. On the third level, it's getting a bit more subtle again. For example, this was a game of mine, which was before iPhone 10, where the screen was just a rectangular screen. So I tried to add what you see at the bottom, a small 3D effect, that you just have the feeling that it hovers over your screen, so that you don't have the impression that I want to represent something, but that the actual game is really on top of the screen and not behind the screen. That's just a small detail, but it just makes a difference in what you're trying to interpret. Games that do pretty well with that is, of course, Black Box. Maybe some of you were here last year when Ryan held his talk. Or one of my favorites, Device 6, where you had to turn the phone around to read a text, and the text would always, or the imagery would always fit to the text, and the device rotation, really interesting experiments with the phone. And the whole lost phone story, where your phone pretends to be another phone, and you have to dig through the phone to find out about the person who owns your phone. And I also put stuff like this in my game Bacon the Game, where you have to show the dialogue for the camera. So if I want to show the camera in the game, I have to show the dialogue. I want to access the camera. And of course, that dialogue is an existing dialogue that I have to show, and it always looks the same on an iOS device. And in that level, you have to put the bacon on the actual pop-up. And that surprised many people. Part 2, Song of Bloom. I always wanted to win an Apple Design Award. I always thought, now, the games that I love, they always win the Apple Design Award. And I also wanted one of that cubes. They feel nice, they look nice, and now I know they're quite heavy as well. And then I made a list of games that I love, put them in one row, and found out all of them are, or all of them are at least beautiful, immersive, and innovative, but stand out in one field mostly. That was before the Apple Design Award had categories on its own. There was just now these are games that we want to give an award to, and I asked myself, okay, where do I see myself? Innovation, check. I'm fast. Immersion, yes, probably I'm pretty diversified. I had a very broad studies where I learned quite a lot of stuff, very superficial, but I can dig into stuff if I need to. But I can't do beautiful stuff. I'm just no illustrator. So the plan was that I make things that are so immersive that people have the feeling that this is beautiful, because the imagery changes so rapidly that they just forget to look, is it actually beautiful or not? So that was the rough plan. But why am I fast? First, because I'm an indie dev. I'm an indie dev who's working solo. I don't have to explain what I'm doing to anyone. I can just experiment, and if it goes wrong, it goes wrong, and it's my it's my own it's my own tragedy then. And second, because at that time I was working with, now it's called SwiftGG for known reasons. I was working with Corona Labs at that time, which is a very easy language to learn, especially for a designer. You just need a few YouTube tutorials and 2 weeks of spare time, and then you can write basically any game if you have the idea and you have the stamina. My code is probably very ugly, but when you compare it to Unity, it's just that, for example, in Corona Labs, you would say, just rotate it, and in Unity you would cast a spell and then it would throw out an error. I don't know. I just use it like Photoshop, so if I compare it to Unity or any other language, it feels more like a paper with a pen that I can erase and I can redraw, and I really use it like a creative tool, where with trial and error, versus an engine that is very powerful, but you already have to know what you're doing quite well, or want to work with others, which is in my case not so important. So where to begin? I just needed something like a seed to begin with, and so I took videos on a vacation, and tried to experiment with those videos. So this is what my experiments looks like, and then I got the idea maybe I can write a 3D interpreter, meaning, as Solar2D says, it's a 2D engine, but I wanted to have 3D elements, and that was quite a process, finding the right math for that. But on the way, I learned quite a bit about maths and and I also learned from my trial and error process. And that was a good seed to start with. So, for example, I got this starry scene where I have to connect stars, and eventually they would turn into a 3D mesh, or a field that almost felt like it was some kind of fur, also with a haptic engine of the iPhone that worked quite well, or something that felt a bit gooey, as if you're running through some sort of slime or something. Also, this felt quite good with the haptic engine, and I mixed that with ASCII art, which I also used to love to do as a teenager, just recreating images by typing them with Korean New, and combining them with some sort of paintbrush, just painting poems, and and then combining those two with the 3D effect. What I also experimented a lot with was perspective. And maybe some of you know the classic churches, for example, that have these trompe-l'œil effects where you paint the ceiling and then you have the impression that you're looking into the sky. And I wanted to recreate that on your phone and try to mess a bit with how the user interacts with the phone. So when you shake it or you tilt it, you would have the feeling that the content was behind the screen, or in that case, in front of the screen. And I experimented a lot with new styles. For example, this is how I was trying to achieve a Rezo print effect with one of those milk bags, with one of those Japanese style Rezo print milk bags. I tried to recreate the flaws that you would see in real life. Like, for example, the colors are always a bit offset on a Rezo print and the shapes are not perfectly. And I concentrated on recreating these flaws to make it look real, so that you're really wondering, now, was this really knitted in that case, or is this really just made by code? And I tried to add imperfections like that. I even recorded my own movement, how I drag paper down to implement that as the settings opening and closing effect to give it some organic touch. And as I love food, I experimented a lot with food, and I also love the language of the aesthetics of how food is presented. This very unorganic, this very stark atmosphere with these wobbling handmade things, somehow really a clash of aesthetics, and I always loved that. And also with the hardware buttons. So I used the volume buttons to control a thing in the game. And I experimented with clay stop motion, and the interaction was to put the charger in to press against this plug. Yes. Now what? I have all my my tiny scenes, but they're not connected anyway. They're just scenes on their own with their own style, their own interaction. And exactly at that time, Apple made a talk that was literally called "How to Win an Apple Design Award." So, like, they made it for me, and then they dropped the word cohesiveness. They all have to be cohesive. And I looked at the games and thought, oh yeah, they're probably true. They are all cohesive. So that was a big problem because my experiments were anything but cohesive. They were very, very differently. So I got back to the sketching board and looked at 4 games that inspired my game the most, which was Black Box with its puzzle design, Florence with the narrative structure. That's Kids. Kids has a really good sense of atmosphere. It has some kind of uneasy atmosphere, and the flow of Prune. Prune worked really well without words, so I borrowed the idea of the tree structure from Prune, and I thought maybe I could use a tree-like narrative structure, so that I have a stem, and the stem is one style, and when I choose another branch, the style also changes and the interaction changes. Like it did, for example, in Twitter or in X or in any other social platform where styles are really, really just there for a second and then changing, and then it's political, it's artistic, it's scientific, everything all at once. So it's really like a visual feast, but somehow works as a whole. or also coming from the art world, the instructions by the installations by Laure Provost, which are all overwhelming your senses and are all flooding your minds, or Franz West with Passstücke, they're called, which are objects which have a specific shape but no specific use. So you have to find for yourself how you're going to hold it, what you're going to do with it. And I thought this could be a nice metaphor for the game, that you have the game, or in that case even the phone, and you treat it like a foreign object where you have to find out for yourself what are you going to do with this foreign object, to find your own sense, that it makes sense for you. And at that time, the release of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was rapidly combining all kinds of styles, also very trashy, which you can also see in the trailer, which also made a lasting impression on me. And of course, because I like food, from the molecular gastronomy, you have tickets in Barcelona, which is some kind of eccentric tapas bar where the dishes are not only eccentric, they're also illusionary sometimes, they're ironic, they're even overextending, and this is what makes them special, and you can't really decode them. You have to really experience them with all of your senses. And then I thought the food metaphor was actually a good metaphor for the game, because I wanted something that is also enjoyable, like a menu. So I liked the comparison, and I thought it would be an intense, individual 18-course menu with nose-to-tail philosophy, which basically just means I don't want to throw away the stuff that I made. And I like the metaphor that it's made for you, and that the device is the story and not only tells the story. So the development overtook the story, and now the common thread is that all has to be intense. I really wanted to be intense. It can be short, but it should be intense. And I found a topic to be quite fitting was hallucination and museum fatigue. If you're ever been more than 3 hours in a museum or on a biennale, you know that you're getting a bit tired of all of these new impressions. And out of this museum fatigue, you would create the topic of interpreting a cultural language, which was the language of the planet Earth, while you're being weak in form of backward repeating fragments. But therefore, I had to free my game from content, and therefore I tried to find something like a language that you couldn't decipher. So I made a font that looks like text but actually isn't, just to use as placeholders for text to keep it vague. So I made a serif font and a sans serif font, and put it in the game, for example, like this, or in a chat, or on ads, or even on the milk. And if you're really into it, you can decipher it, but it's not part of the game. So it actually stands for something, but it's not used to be deciphered. And then I had my base, my stem, which was rotoscopy, which meant drawing over film, and then the drawing was shown as the main of the game, as the main stem. And I tried to make it a rhythm-based game, that it was very made to be fit on music, but this didn't really work at all. It was too fast when I tested with my mom. The goal was unclear, the interaction was unclear. The interaction at that time was pinch to blink, because that was from the perspective of the protagonist, and I thought it was a good idea to pinch to go back to the menu. I was really proud of that, but in the process of experimenting, you would just accidentally pinch, and that would also be not a good idea to send players back randomly. So I decided now the game has to have its own pace, so that every player can play it on their own speed. The goal should be unclear, the goal was unclear. Now it should be made clear by finding asterisks and giving hints how to change paths. And the interaction was unclear, so I improved the menu screen and introduced a back button.
And again, I see the signs.
So when you play the main part, you would always come back to the menu screen with the tree and see how the tree develops, and use the tree as a map for navigating through the quite complex tree-like narrative structure. The story change was that the whole frame was presented as memories to the earth. I wanted to keep it quite vague, so in the end you would see yourself walking up a hill and planting this exact tree that you were playing with as an homage to the earth. And in the end, I only had to stitch it together, adding my asterisks to get it to make it a game. And for example, this was a change of the scene where you came from the stem and then you draw a square around one of the UIs, and then it changes into this art look, and then you can play around with in the art scene.
More signs.
Or in this example, you go into a scene where you're tattooing someone. I tried to do it as individual as possible. In the meal metaphor, it would be that it was especially made for you and not for anyone else. For example, when you answer the chat, or you took a photo to answer the chat because you couldn't know what they were writing in their foreign language, you would see what you were writing later. So if I enter hello and what do you want, I would find my own messages in the game greeting me later when I open the champagne bottle. And there you would see what you just typed in. And also you would find your own name if your device is, for example, my phone is, for example, called Philipp's iPhone, and there I would extract the name from the player, in that case Philipp, and you would find your own name as part of the game. And if you took a photo, your photo would appear on the back of the milk bag, and that was somehow connecting the game and made it your game. And also your reflection was very subtly in the mirror. You can see it a bit in the glass. And then when it came to the final branch, you can see that on the top left, the very first video that I showed at the start of the presentation appeared in the game again and closes the game. So that was quite a round thing then. So this is the trailer of the finished game.
Ich wurde in einer Zeit geboren, als wir die Zeichen ignorierten, die wir erhalten haben.
Yes, and I got my Apple Design Award, and I was very happy about that. Yeah, thank you. That was in 2020. The problem with 2020 was, of course, it was Corona, so everything was online. Very bad timing. So, of course, my solution was I had to go to the very start because I wanted to go to Cupertino, I wanted to see the Apple Loop, and I had to do it all again. So for my next project, I remembered I saw British television once, and I found Lorraine, who was performing one of her ironic, trashy songs, and the humor and the topics of her song. It's every song is about food as well. It's innocent, it's ironic, it's trashy. It all matched pretty well with the humor of my games. So I asked her if she wanted to do a collaboration with me, and because my food trilogy went so well, I thought of something like Bacon the musical, and in the style of something like a paper stop motion, like you knew from Monty Python. So I wrote her, and she said, well, no, not if it's about bacon. I don't like bacon, but if it's not about bacon, I'm interested maybe. And just a few weeks later, I got a prize money from a German prize, which I had to spend on games. So that was a pretty good coincidence. I just gave her all the money of the prize, and she said, "Let's go," but not with bacon. So I came up with other iconic food, and the first thing that came to mind was the PBJ sandwich, which was good because two protagonists could be more interesting than one. It has a better story arc, it has more variety, and more chance of being ridiculous, because I can tell of two worlds. And of course, what makes also sense is that this has to be the world of Romeo and Juliet. Romeo as a peanut and Juliet as a strawberry. The very first prototype that I made, I just used a song of Lorraine, because I thought I used this as a demo how good her songs fit to the aesthetics of the game. And it did fit quite well, I think, even though the song is not really fitting to, or at least content-wise, the song is not fitting. It's fitting for in terms of the atmosphere. So I wrote a very rough storyboard in 10 acts. What should happen between the peanut butter toast and the jelly toast. And the first problem was that the toasts don't have feelings. And I mean, when I want to do a musical, I have to convey a feeling, but the toast just exists. You can't really convey a feeling with the toast. So I had to scratch them from the board again, and I had the idea to make it from the very beginning, to tell it as a living peanut, as a living strawberry, because I could give them eyes, and they also could die in the end, like Romeo and Juliet do, and create the iconic PBJ sandwich. And to try to find one common thread with Lorraine, I tried to make this the aesthetics and the storyboard as clear as possible, and I tried to tell her what songs I needed from her. And I wrote storyboards with made-up texts and made-up songs, just to tell her what the length would be and where the blue parts, the most important things, the buffers had to be. So the buffers had to make sure that for every player, no matter how long they take, it would be a good experience. And the buffers could loop as long as the player would take to finish the level. So Lorraine was brief, Lorraine was happy, and then the second problem came to mind, that the eyes were not bleeding enough. Like I thought, now this has to be a visual overkill. The player's not dizzy enough, and the whole scene is not intense enough, and it's not dense enough. And when you look at it, there are just too many blank spaces. So I had the idea that the gravity could be changing, and you would. I could draw a map underneath, and red means down and orange means in this direction, for example. That made it possible to make the worlds more dense, to create things that I could stuff more stuff into, and also adapt the difficulty more easily. And it also made you quite dizzy, so that was good as well. The next part was a long part because it was manual labor at its best. I was printing out and cutting out and scanning again and photographing it again, hundreds of paper figures. and then re-importing them into Unity, and by just giving them a BPM value, they were animating on its own. And then I tried to, same with Song of Bloom, I tried to give them those tiny imperfections in form of a shader, in that case, to make them look like they were crumpling like real paper would do in a very imperfect way that paper stop motion does, where the camera changes, the lighting changes, maybe you're accidentally touching something, and then the shadows, of course, change, the gloss changes, and also how the paper looks. This was a lot of work, and during COVID I had nothing better to do, so I was pretty, like you see the chef in the middle. And in the end, I found 5 different aesthetics for the game. The Strawberry World was a royal world with vintage fashion magazines, very glossy, very colorful. The Peanut World was a capitalist, US, cold, black and white newspaper. I even wrote my own newspaper for that, the Nuts Daily, just to photograph it, flip it, and then put it in the back. You can see that it's the background of the peanut scenes. However, I don't think anyone will ever read that, but if you have the chance, it actually says something. The kitchen scene, that's really made out of existing old cookbooks, so I try to find corresponding shapes out of cookbooks. And the King World, where just everything was allowed. It was just the final scene where everything came together, no rules. And I even animated real peanut butter and jellies in that scene.
Peanut butter and jellies.
I think I have to speed through the last part because I only have 3 minutes left. But I'll give you a quick overview that now I have the problem that the graphics are very fixed, but the gameplay was, it was not really corresponding to the gameplay. When you compare it to Bake in the Game, you have a lot of space, you have very clear shapes, but through my own restrictions, I had to somehow come up with an idea of a better gameplay. And also, the frame rate is of course very low in a paper stop motion, so I had to adapt it by your own position. When you see around the peanut, the frame rate is higher than, for example, the butterfly at the top. And the controls were being too fragile. In this case, it worked pretty well, but if the shapes went bigger, you had the feeling, now this doesn't really behave like paper. When you draw it, it should actually crumble and not only follow your movement. So instead, I added a few splats, but then to get me out of my creative break, and because this is also an app that's available in China, I cooperated with an institute for quantum physics to make an app about quantum physics and to get children and young people get interested in quantum physics because they're lacking of young people. And that was a good break because I met real people again that were smart, that were enthusiastic, and that was a really good break. So I could get inspiration for my musical project again. And in the end, I found a good solution by just making the buttons clearer, a lot of user testing, a lot of interaction changes. So the target group won't play anyway. They would look at it and think, now it's a musical, why should I touch anything? So I added an autoplay feature which drags you through the level if you don't touch anything. So you could just place your iPad there and just watch it like a musical and it would play itself. And then in December 2024, I actually saw Lorraine for the first time. The rest was just communication over Slack. Presented her my game.
There never was a sandwich of more poetry than this. Of peanut butter
jelly.
And we were all pretty proud of what we made together.
The recipe tonight is you're ready for the big wide world.
Yes, and we got our award. Thank you.